All right, folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer podcast. I am your host, Logan Swanson, and today we have Chris Duff with us, a fellow land funder. We're going to be learning a lot from him today. As usual, if you're interested in buying or selling land, go to primelandexchange.com. We have some of the best off-market land deals you're going to find, and it's about to explode with all sorts of new listings. So bookmark it, sign up for our email blast. You're going to get a lot of great stuff there. If you need funding, go to landpartnerfunding.com or seriouslandcapital.com and get some funding from us. And if you need any deals underwritten, I got your man here. So Chris Duff out with Serious Land Capital. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into land and where you are today?
Yeah, much appreciated for you hosting me here, Logan. I know some folks might have heard me on different podcasts or met in person and so forth. But if you haven't, my two partners and I at Serious Land Capital, we've been in the land space since late 2019, early 2020, when a lot of folks had kind of gotten into this industry.
Yep,
Yeah,
me too.
exactly. And initially, we ran a kind of standard direct marketing land flipping business. Had varying success in there. As we all know, the market has changed rapidly since COVID, and navigating different microeconomies and so forth there. But ultimately, in early 2023, we arrived at the conclusion that our personalities and skill sets were more suited from a funder perspective. And so we just stopped marketing entirely, switched over to a funding model. We weren't good at talking to sellers. We weren't good at marketing out, but we were excellent at underwriting, excellent at capital structuring. So that's what we doubled down on, and our business, really took off accordingly.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Similar trajectory as my fans know. Um, I'm curious, did you in your pre-land life, were you sort of like in an analytical business, or what did you do before you got into land that makes you so good at underwriting?
Yes, I'm actually a physician by training. So, went to
Mm,
med school, didn't pursue the clinical route there, tried to start varying businesses, med device, involved in other ventures there. But, a lot of folks had always asked that, oh, you use all that money and go into med school all the time, et cetera. And to me, it was always just, I saw the skills as applicable to other areas. And to me, translating over to land, you're just kind of diagnosing different parcels, and then trying to also give a prognosis of where it's going to sell. So you just kind of take these same mental models, and really try to figure out what the right details are, just like if you were assessing a patient. So that's kind of a mental model I keep in the background there. But beyond that, had gone into the realms of internet marketing for a while. Really worked kind of strict copywriting roles, and then got into
mm,
healthcare venture capital. So that was a lot more deal assessment as well there. And healthcare businesses. I mean, we think land is complicated sometimes. Like take a look at biotech firms. Like it is a
uh,
story, and you got 7 to 10 year gambles on it, really gambles in terms of what type of outcomes you might get, and you don't have any collateral. So to me, it was made a bit more sense to move into the land space. You have a little bit more control, and less chance to lose your shirt on poor investments.
yeah, this is relatively low stakes, I would say. And that is interesting. I mean, what do you think of? I think of like a triage in a hospital. I mean, that's kind of how I feel when I'm looking at a bunch of land deals that are coming in. If you're a funding company, um, we've had highs and lows. Right now, I think it's been kind of drier recently, but we've had times where it's literally like deal after deal after deal is coming in, and you have to be able to underwrite those quickly. And really, I've always been of the mentality like my goal is to kill the deal as quickly as possible, so it kind of consumes as little of our time and bandwidth, and just get off my computer, my laptop screen, so I can move on to the next one. So that kind of brings me to underwriting, right? I have an audience here of folks that are interested in buying land, and I think a lot of people come to a purchase decision. They say, well, this property seems to be suitable for X, Y, and Z uses I intend. It's maybe close to a purchase price that I like, but I've never bought land before, so I don't know if this is a good deal. How do I? Well, underwriting is very similar. Like we do it on a grand scale because we're looking at tons and tons of deals, and we're looking at buying something below market, so it's not necessarily the same thing. But a lot of it does translate. So I was wondering if you'd kind of walk us through how you would underwrite deals, and maybe it'd be useful to do kind of a tiered approach, right? We underwrite small deals differently from the way that we would underwrite maybe a large subdivide or some sort of entitlement project. So maybe if you start simple and maybe go a little more on the complex side without losing everybody, and tell us about how do you underwrite.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to dive in because we look at things, probably very similarly and see, a wide swath of different parcels. We look at anything around the country. So, it could be, 100, 200 acre rural parcel
Mm-hmm.
or, a 0.2 acre infill lot. Yeah, just imagine, anything that might be in the country we're willing to take a look at. So, it's given us a lot of uh, detailed expertise in certain areas, but there's always general trends that you can follow accordingly. And the thing about our industry too is that we while we aren't end land buyers, we have to look at it from the perspective of any land buyer
Right.
before we arrive at our pricing. Since we are just effectively middlemen in the deal, so we are buyers and then sellers immediately there. So you have to be paying attention from both sides. And the smaller properties, really anything that I'm initially looking at, I'm going to be taking a look at the property characteristics first. So even if you are just kind of a recreational land buyer, or honestly, even if you were just looking to pick up one parcel, maybe two parcels, uh, it wouldn't hurt to invest in, a little bit of the standard tools that, us kind of, institutional professionals utilize in our land space. Land ID,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a requisite tool for any land investor. And,
Yes.
even if you wanted to, again, just buy, one parcel there, it's a $10 a month for you to start up a subscription. So at least you can kind of nail down what might be some key flags there because unfortunately if you're looking at MLS or Redfin, Zillow, what have you, there's plenty of unscrupulous sellers out there that can make a property look absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But when you dive into the characteristics, look at the overlays and so forth, you're like, oh wow, this thing's covered in wetlands. The neighbor situation doesn't look too good and so forth. Contour is not what it looks like in the picture. So before I even jump into pricing, I'm looking at the characteristics first, and generally my base level overlays are going to be looking at contour, flood zone, wetlands, and soil overlays. Some parts of the country that those factors are going to be more relevant than others, but those ones I'm going to be looking at regardless of where I am in the country there, because that's going to tell me pretty quickly on whether there's any feasibility for take your pick resi rec usage and so forth, and starting to suss out, all right, who might an end buyer be here,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm even going to pursue this property in the first place. And there's plenty of properties that I'm just going to eliminate from reviewing just based on that alone. Because it just has inferior characteristics compared to something else that might be on the market, or might come on the market. You never know. You don't want to be stuck buying a property when if you wait a week, you might find something better that might be similarly priced and better for your unique circumstances of your usage there. So I'll pause there in case you had any additional questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that's I think that what is that? The seven habits of highly effective people. The first one is start with the end in mind. So if you're starting with the end buyer in mind, whether you are the end buyer or you're the investor who's facilitating getting it to the end buyer, it's the same thing. And it is funny, like you would think that this is obvious information, but that is not what I have found to be the case at all. I have this property that has been sitting on the shelf forever. I should probably just cut it down to like fire sale price, but it's a 6 acre property out in Klamath County, Oregon, that I have put all over the ad everywhere. It's zoned for forestry. Okay, so it has like some recreational application. It's very pretty. It's remote. It's gonna be perfect for somebody. But everybody that responds to my ad wants to build a house on it. And even though it's all over the place in it, this is not suitable for residents, not suitable for it's over and over again on this ad. People are always calling me asking, how do I get, always wanting a residential purpose for it. And I get it. It is really pretty, but yeah, that's such an obvious thing. And really, like this is a big deal. And I have another one that comes to mind. We have a property that we recently funded that I'm kind of kicking myself over. But we bought about 140 acres in Kentucky. It's an area that's not a high, there's not a lot of transactions going on there. And it's actually divided into two roughly 70-acre properties. And because of the terrain type, it'd be difficult to really build on it. It's not ideal for residential. It's not big enough for someone to hunt. It's too steep for timber. But the price seemed like, how could we lose? So we bought it, and I'm sure it'll sell. We're probably not going to make a killing on it, but it kept going through my head over and over again. Like, who is this for? There's it's for somebody at the right price, right? But who is it for in a general market? Are people actually, is that sort of person exist? Is there a lot of those people in a market? That's when, if you start with that end in mind, you can really suss out if it's a good deal. So I think there's a whole lot of wisdom in that, and we could spend a lot of time actually identifying. Because I have a marketing company as well, and what my marketing company does is it identifies primary motivation and emotions for people who buy land. And it always comes down to use. Like, what are they going to use it for? And sometimes it is just investment. Sometimes it is just land bank, and they don't actually need to use the property for any specific reason. But yeah, there's so much wisdom in starting there and making that your main focus before you go any further.
Yeah, and just to jump on that point too, and that's why I love starting with characteristics first, because if you jump right into pricing, it's
Hmm.
easy to instinctually get anchored. Even if you've been doing this a long time, and we look at millions of dollars worth of property
Hmm.
every week, and we still make mistakes. Like
Hmm.
it's a constantly evolving process there. But with that point of starting with the end in mind too, that's why I always like looking at the characteristics, because if my mind is kind of triggering, okay, this is probably has some residential usage, or maybe, okay, yeah, the slope's just not going to support this. This is like either going to be pure hunting, some type of rec usage, maybe, I don't know the zoning yet, but possibly timber. Then I'm going to have those type of buyers in mind when I go to actually comp out the property on Redfin and Zillow. And if I can't see comps that are have similar type of usage there that are actually moving, then I'm going to get a lot more cagey about pursuing that property, even if the price is looking appropriate based on what some of the other
Hmm.
properties are going for. So to me, especially in this market, to even if you intend to hold the land forever, you never know what comes up in your life. That's where folks like us come in to work with motivated sellers here. So in case you have to get out of your land, like you want to make sure that you're still buying it at an appropriate price. So, worst case, you can break even or get a little bit of appreciation over time here. It's just you don't want to get stuck overpaying. I see so many of these sellers nowadays that bought peak market, like oh 04, oh
Hmm.
05, and so forth. That the values aren't even close to where they were anymore, even 20 years later. And you just want to avoid that situation as much as possible here by sticking with the fundamentals and what the overarching market is doing.
Hmm. Yeah, so 100%. That's actually kind of sad. I've run into this a few times where land has not held value, and we actually discussed it a little bit on my last Zoom. But I was in a situation where I had bought a parcel. It was like a infill lot by a lake, I bought a parcel. It was in a restrictive HOA. You had to work with one of two builders. It was just madness. So most of these lots were sitting vacant. Um, and there's people who bought these lots for like 30, $40,000 in the past. And I was looking at comps. I'm like, these things aren't selling above 10 grand. Like that's the transaction right here. So I got a bunch of these leads in. I didn't do a lot of, whatever. We mailed back and a bunch of people were like, I'll sell,
Exactly.
And I dug into it a little bit, and we ended up buying a couple properties out there and doing fine. But we bought them for 1,500 bucks a piece, and these people bought them for 40 grand. I had one of the people we bought it from. They still owed $6,000 on their note, so they paid $6,000, and then I paid them $1,500 to buy the property, and then I sold it for 12. It's like so
Yeah,
you there's
it's
areas
taking
where
a
you have to
bath out
be
there. Yeah.
super, super detailed. And I think that kind of leads me into what is, again, a huge and endless topic, but um, very relevant because if you're a land buyer, it is actually common to encounter brokers that have no idea how to value land. So that is, if there is one job that we have in underwriting, that is a useful skill, we can at least glean a little bit of information to people who are listening. Is like, how do you evaluate land? Um, and it's a huge question. But what is your best way to summarize what you guys do to come to a retail value in like 5 minutes? Can you? That's a huge challenge. But what can you do for me?
Yeah. Again, that the point to kind of reiterate is, yeah, if I'm really trying to rush through and I do have, I can throw in a quick plug, my Land Daily Diligence Facebook group, folks just send me deals, whether they want funding or not. I'll live review them. So even if you're a land buyer and, I'm happy to take a look at a deal just to, show you my thought process before you put your money down. So, just keep that in mind here. But yeah, I mean, some of these I can churn through very quickly. The data might be high quality or it's just very clear cut. Others might take 40 to 60 minutes depending on how complex they are. But initially, again, I'm starting with those characteristics. Are there some just immediate throwaway signs? Does it have deeded access, any type of road access? Is it covered in wetlands? Is the terrain just completely unusable and isn't large enough to be considered for rec? So some of those I don't even need to comp out because it's just not going to be of interest. And also from a pricing perspective, I'm not really trying to buy any land under $20,000 purchase price. If I'm trying to sell those smaller pieces, my absolute or my relative margin is getting eaten up a lot more by commission and closing costs. In my experience, it isn't really worth the squeeze at that point too. So if it's just lower value, boom, that's out of there as well. But yeah, when I'm getting over the characteristics, it makes that at least passes the initial test there. Then yeah, I'm going to open up Redfin. I prefer that as my default there. I think the data quality is a little bit better than Zillow, and it's the UX is a little bit better. I like Zillow to compare active listings with the view and saves. But for sold comps and initial, sussing out the market, Redfin is my go-to personally there. And so then I'm just going to be, assessing initially what are my sold comps. I really don't like data older than 12 months. Usually nothing more than the lagging 6 months. But depending what type of or what area of the country you're in, you have to update that accordingly. And then you want to set your ranges in terms of acreage to include whatever piece of land that you're doing. And usually the smaller the piece of land, you should have a more narrow band for your acreage range. But if you're in a more rural area, a larger parcel, you can open it up a little bit more since the comps are probably going to be more limited. But that's kind of the only parameters that I'm going to put in my search function, and then I'm just kind of diving into all those comps. And the number one thing that I see people kind of speed right through is they only take like the Redfin or the MLS data at face value. No, you have to go back and find the right APN, find the address, and throw it back in Land ID. I mean, there's yeah, probably half the time that I'm finding comps on Redfin, they're inaccurately pinned, or it's the wrong APN. And so I'm not able to tell what the actual characteristics are. And again, like we mentioned at the start of this, you have unscrupulous sellers where they could just be lying through their teeth about the characteristics without you being able to go back and match what you're reading in the property description with what the actual county data is and all the national overlays. So that's what I'm always translating that back. Sometimes it's a whole I Spy service. They don't have the APNs. You got to find the road and just kind of figure out what's the right shape there based on what's showing on Redfin or the MLS, and figure that out. So all of that, when you're really kind of speeding along, and yeah, I have the experience of having done this a long time. Yeah, I can do all of that within sometimes a few minutes, 5 minutes or so forth. But naturally, that can expand outward depending on how complex the property is, or if I'm assessing from a subdivide perspective, having to look at possible child parcels and so forth there.
Yeah, I mean that's wow. I mean you covered a lot of ground, but I think you nailed it. And really, you can take that same perspective and bring it back again to what we first discussed, which is like start with the end in mind. So certain markets, when you're looking at comps and they're all laid out on a flat map and they're all close to each other, you might assume that it's safe to just aggregate that data, put it in a spreadsheet, and send it out. But you really, it's so dependent on, like, for example, let's look at like North Carolina in the mountains. Like people are buying land for views. And you could take five comps that are all very close to each other and assume they're the same thing. But if you pull them up on Land ID and you actually go to those parcels in the 3D view and see what the views are from each parcel, you'll get it's impossible to calculate just with the numbers on a piece of paper. Um, so there's the only way to really know that is to know your market and be able to learn a market very quickly. And one of the things that I've learned is to actually, if you're looking at comps on Redfin, is to read descriptions. Like if I'm in an unfamiliar market, when you read descriptions, the brokers who are actually local should kind of know who they're trying to sell to, and they'll start referencing and using the words for who the buyers are for that area. And it could be very specific. Um, could be views, it could be, whatever else. Access, like certain parts of lakes, for example, lake communities, even if they're all waterfront, they may not all be dockable, or they may not all be, there's so many different features and facets that are really important. And this kind of goes back to why it's so important to spend a little bit of time. My first step when I'm underwriting something is do that pre-screen. If there's something wild that identifies why this is not a good fit, get it off my screen. But then I like to read a little bit about the area. Like I'll pull up Wikipedia and I'll look at the county, and they'll tell it. There's little hints all over the place. And then I also look at local newspapers, kind of glean for 5 or 10 minutes, especially the bigger deals. If I'm spending $100,000 or something, I want to know what's going on in the area and the county. Um, and then I make sure that my partner has contacted a couple brokers and vetted them a little bit. And the sort of questions that I ask aren't necessarily just land related. It's like, did you grow up there? Do who's the mayor of this city or whatever? And you can kind of get a feel if they're tied historically to the area well enough to know what people are looking for when they're buying or doing business out there. So, man, we've put a lot of
100%.
value into this little podcast. But hey, tell me a little bit more about Serious Land Capital before we sign off. I think we covered a lot of ground here, and there's a lot of really valuable nuggets. But tell us, if there's flippers out there that need funding, what do they do to get in touch with you, and what can they expect working with you?
Yeah, certainly. And again, will have to probably do a part two or something. That there's just
Yeah,
my
there's so much
mind is
more.
spinning on so many other jump off points. But yeah, for as far as plugging the company that I'm at, seriousland.capital is where you can find out a lot more about us. Again, we are strictly funders and from an equity perspective. So usually, if you have a deal and are looking for funding, we'll put up 100% of the capital, take title, and then split profits on the back end. Usually, we're taking a cut between 30 to 50% on average, depending on how much capital is needed, time on market, and so forth there. But usually we're looking at 50 to 500K purchase price deals. We have the opportunity to go beyond that if seller is willing to finance, and we don't do anything below 20,000 purchase price, as mentioned before. We can do single flips, minor subdivides. We also fund entitlement deals. We do some short-term lending as well. We do transactional lending, so we're kind of a full suite financier for land investors there, and do a little bit of debt for entitlement or short-term lending, but the vast majority of our business is in the equity space. And we also have a site, landfunding.partners. So that lists, as far as we're aware, all of the known land funders in the space. You can find Logan's company on there as well too. So, and the thing about that site is that you're able to filter for what you're looking for. If you're looking for debt lending, go ahead and search for that, equity, transactional, what have you. You can kind of easily compare side by side for what you might be looking for in a land funder. And plenty of us, we might be tied up in capital sometimes too. So, you might be able to work with, one of us one time, the other, funder another time there. And most of us, kind of know each other, like Logan and myself. So, happy to kind of, swap deals or share notes and so forth. So, just kind of know that you have a wider support system to be able to pull from, and folks who are really more collaborative in nature, given the the smallish industry that we work in. And then I did mention that Land Daily Diligence
Yep.
as well there. And the last piece that I will mention, just to, we're recording this, in August 2024, we're expecting to launch a AI underwriting tool specific to land before the end of the year. That is, you'll be able to find it at landpricer.ai. So that is currently being built at the moment. But everything that Logan and I were talking about today, we're putting it into software form. So even as a land buyer, you'll be able to properly suss out and price land accordingly, whether you're looking to sell it or just purchase it on your own. So just want to give a heads up about that project too.
Oh, that's badass. Yeah, we need to have a whole other podcast just talking land and AI, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's wild what we're starting to build already.
Beautiful. Well, hey, Chris, I really appreciate your time. Um, Folks, if you need funding, you know where to go, landpartnerfunding.com. What is it? Landfunding.partners. You can go check out other
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
If you need to buy or sell land and you want a good deal, go to primelandexchange.com. We can help you out there. Chris, you have a beautiful evening. I hope to talk to you soon. We'll have probably a part two and a part three, maybe part four. We'll see.
Absolutely, Logan. Yeah, looking forward to it. Appreciate the opportunity. Have a good evening too.
Cheers.